Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you on Monday. Amazing news last night. I was up a little too late myself, just tracking the Beyonce news and then just kind of a little bit hyped up. And so that was really fun. And then to track during the day today, I'm sure along with me, you guys are tracking both the news, but also like the ticket sales, checking some theaters. So we'll definitely talk today about Taylor and Beyonce and continued just amazing progress on what that's going to mean for AMC and what that's going to ultimately mean for the stock. Yesterday, I had released a Q3 earnings forecast. Check that out if you're interested and you want to kind of know where I think we landed for Q3. And then I had said the follow-ons I'll be doing Q4 and I'll be doing full year 2024. So today's really Q4, but you can't talk about Q4 without talking about the concerts and what this whole new business means for AMC. So we're going to have to click into that in today's video. We'll talk through distribution. We'll talk through, um, honestly, some guesses in some cases at how much money will AMC make and how big are these concerts and all of that. So what I'll do is I'll just share with you a little bit of where my thinking's at. I always tell you guys if there's a saying in business and forecasting that if you have a forecast, it's wrong. And so today, more than ever, you're just going to get a lot of humility on these numbers. Anybody out there who's telling you they know what the numbers are either has way too big of an ego or is just pulling one over on you. None of us knows. If you're new to my channel, I'll share with you just some of my background. I worked at a Dow Jones company for 21 years. I led teams that did planning and forecasting for businesses over $2 billion a year. So I know a little something about forecasting. And then I've got 2 master's degrees in business with some training there. And the thing is, if you get good at planning, you actually end up with a lot of humility because you realize, frankly, how hard it is. No one has a crystal ball. If you did have a crystal ball, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd probably be a billionaire because if I could accurately predict the future, I could make a lot of money off of that, right? So I am here perhaps more trained than some, but that does not mean I'm going to be right. So I'm going to share with you numbers today, share with you how I got to those numbers. And like I said, more than ever, especially around these concerts, even just kind of crowdsource this with you. So, yes, it's my video, I'm the one talking, but as you guys listen in, I think you can have your own thoughts and responses, and apes, we'll all sharpen each other. I've shared with you guys on this channel too that I tend to be more active on Twitter than YouTube. So, if you want to kind of interact with me a little more, go there. And in particular, too, this idea of us all sharpening each other, there's a lot of info passing back and forth there, too. So, that might be a place you'll see me kind of sharing thoughts and hearing from others as well. All right, so without more, let's go ahead and dive into this. So a few things. First of all, as far as this concert notion, and not just the idea of these concert movies, but the idea of AMC as a distributor, it's a complete game changer, right? So the first thing that's just painfully obvious is that it's added to the box office. So if you add these movies in and treat them in some ways like a movie, now there's more ticket sales, both domestic and international. So that's a big deal. We've got an uptick because then there's more attendance. You've got this uptick in merch sales and in food and beverage sales. So that's great for AMC. Then we've got this distribution revenue, which we're going to talk about. How much is AMC making on distribution? And the thing, too, is, I'm not going to get into a lot of arguments about that. I'm going to share with you the numbers I've used because honestly, we don't need to argue. Like, whatever number you want to use, the point is, I'm calling it gravy because it's just over and above anything we've ever had. This is a new revenue stream, entirely new. There's this idea of direct to consumer, which I believe the artists are really going to like over time for a lot of reasons. One is controlling your message, going straight to your, in this case, the consumer is fans, right? So Swifties and Beehivers, and I'm going to have to learn how to say that right. So sorry, guys, if I said that wrong, but the Beehive, Bayhive, whatever. Anyway, there's this idea of going straight to consumer that businesses love because you can pocket more margin, so you keep more money in house. So that the artists in this case, if you notice, are starting to get to kind of skip normal distribution models and work out a deal with AMC. And then of course it's great for AMC because now AMC is the one distributing. So kind of keep track of that. That's kind of a game changer here in the music industry. Who knows if it could show up in movies? That probably gets a little bit dicey in terms of AMC's relationships with studios, right? So we're going to have to keep track of that. But I don't know, could some indie movie creators start to release some films with AMC or something? Perhaps. I don't know. I'm not saying that's happening yet, but I'm saying it's out there for sure. And then just the idea of a new era for concert movies. Hold on to that thought because I'm going to show you in a little bit the top 10 all time concert movies, which I'd also posted on Twitter or X earlier today. And I want to just talk through how to consider that, right? Because in some cases, the past history of concert markets has not been as big as what I believe we're dealing with now. So that's why I'm calling this a new era in concert movies. I think people are reimagining what the concert film can be, what the engagement with fan bases is. And I have a feeling we're probably going to be talking about things being a little bigger than what they've historically been. So, is this kind of a new era for concert movies? Let's just talk through that a little bit. Before we kind of get into the numbers, you need to let's ground ourselves basically in where we were when these concert movies showed up. So now remember, we've had this long writer strike, which thankfully is over, and we've got the actors strike still going, but rumors that maybe we're making progress there too. Well, because of the writer's strike, there were some movies that moved out of Q4. I think I mentioned in the video yesterday that for a while I was not looking forward to sharing a Q4 forecast because it got a little bit ugly, guys. Pardon me. I'll just be dealing with some sniffles and cough from this hangover from this cold that's a little worse even than yesterday. So please forgive me for sounding terrible. Yeah, so if you see here on the slide, Dune 2, Ghostbusters, Afterlife, Craven the Hunter. There were some other movies as well. There was over $500 million, at least if you go by my forecast, over $500 million. And really, I incorporate a lot of industry forecasts there too, for those of you who are newer here. I go through, anytime I do a forecast, I look at every single movie that's releasing. I look at about 4 or 5 industry sources to kind of compile where are people forecasting this, and then I land on my own number. So somewhere around $500 million, though, of domestic box office. So then you've got to probably double or more that, once you add in the international box office. And then you factor in that's less food and beverage sales, that's less merch sales. So it was a really big hit Q4 had taken that I was going to have to share with you guys. But I kind of say here, Tay Bay saved the day. So we went from, at one point, I still had a positive earnings forecast on Q4. It was almost flat. It was like just barely positive before those movies moved out. Once those movies moved out, we went real negative on earnings. But I guess I'm giving away the punchline here that I'll get to on Q4 is I'm back to saying that we're at positive earnings. And I'll show you the build on how I get there. All right, so first off, speaking of how do we get there, so here's what's still remaining. I mentioned that the forecast I do, I go through every single movie by release date, look at industry forecasts, figure out my own forecast, look at if it's a franchise, like here, Trolls is on here. What's the history of the Trolls movies? How about Hunger Games, Marvels, these kinds of things. So these are your top 6 movies that are in the quarter, if you're to believe industry forecasts plus my forecast. It doesn't by any means mean these are the only big 6 movies. There's a lot, like, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is about to come up. And there's some other big ones too. Napoleon, Killers of the Flower Moon. There's some really awesome movies coming out. I'm just showing you kind of the top movies so you get an idea of kind of what's out there, besides the concerts, of course, that we're going to talk a lot about. So just kind of file that away in your head. Still some great movies in the quarter. Perhaps I can sort of publish for you the entire list soon. Maybe I'll hit that on Twitter or something like that. Okay. Let's talk concerts a little bit before I share any numbers. Here's some different things that we need to be thinking about. And again, a lot of times I'll share this stuff so that you can also think about it for yourself and decide where you agree or disagree with me, and that's fine. The fact that this is a forecast, you're going to hear a lot of humility from me today, more than usual even, because this is so new, so different, and frankly so hard right now to forecast, unless Adam and the team would give us a little more information. And I'm fine that they aren't. There's some competitive information that they're keeping tight to the vest, which we'll talk about. So we've got to deal with what we know, and I'm just going to be honest with you, this is a little hard to forecast right now. Okay, so we know from, go back to the main source article, which was that Puck article. Perhaps on Reddit or Twitter or Facebook somewhere, maybe on YouTube even, that you've seen that. So I'm kind of referencing that Puck article because that's the closest thing we have to a direct source on the numbers. So we saw that AMC keeps 43% of admissions as an exhibitor. And then the other 57% AMC and the Swifts are splitting. Um, talk more about that in a minute. So first, right off the bat, whatever number you come up with as the total box office, you say, okay, then you got AMC's market share, and then you figure AMC keeps basically 43% of their admissions. Well, then, um, and remember that keeping that 43%, that's as the exhibitor. This is going to start to matter. We're going to talk about the exhibitor and the distributor. AMC is both, right? So AMC is an exhibitor that shows or exhibits movies, but also now a distributor that um, basically gets the movies into even other theaters and into its own theater. So AMC is the distributor to AMC, is how I'm viewing that. All right. Here's an assumption that I have that you will see in my numbers. I believe on these two concert movies that I'm going to go ahead and assume AMC has a little bit higher than their normal market share. And I'll give you a few reasons why. So first off, they kind of were the name in all the announcements, right? So if you're a Swiftie or if you're from the Bayhive, then you are seeing the name AMC everywhere. And then also AMC was kind of first. Like I want to say, and don't quote me on this because I can't promise I'm right, but I want to say with the Taylor Swift concert that AMC might have had the site up for selling tickets a little bit before, even if it was an hour or two, whatever. Let's say before Fandango and before the other, the competition theater chains. So in general, with AMC kind of driving this and being sort of front and center and named in all the articles, named in all the announcements, named in all the tweets, even by the artists, things like that, I'm going to go ahead and assume there's at least some small uptick in, if someone is, let's say, just as close to a Regal as they are to an AMC, there's some percentage of people now who lean towards AMC. So a little higher than usual market share. I am making an assumption here, and guys, this, I cannot source, I cannot back it up. I always say on this channel, no trust me, bro. So let me explain to you point number 3, why I got to 6%. This is the distributor cut, I am saying. So I'm saying AMC keeps 6% of all admissions as the distributor. Now, I have no idea what the right number is. If you go Google, you'll find a normal cut is actually way higher than that. Normal cut is like 20 to 30% for distributors. But we've also seen, definitely seen a source quoting on Beyonce saying she is getting more than 50% of the total cut. And then in that kind of quote, that source was also saying that basically Beyonce is getting a similar deal as the Swifts. So we know, let's go back to that Puck article too. We know that AMC was getting the 43%, and then the Puck article quoted that the Swifts and AMC would split the other 57%. But the article also says, if you catch, there's a line in there that says basically the Swifts would get, and I quote, the lion's share of that 57%. So if I just take a couple of data points, and these are so loose, I hope you guys hear how I cannot prove to you that this is correct. So this is just my take, and the point is you can either say, I think he's too high or I think he's too low, and you can kind of flex up or down from my number. If we know that they're splitting the 57%, and we hear that Beyonce is getting a little more than half, and we hear that that's pretty much the same as the Swifts deal, then we know the Swifts are getting a little more than half of the total. And so if I say that they're going to get basically 51% of the total, where that lands me is AMC getting 6% on this distribution cut. So it's kind of, I reverse engineered it for myself, kind of in some spreadsheet work, but basically saying the Swifts get 51%, AMC has that, basically to land the Swifts at 51%, AMC is going to get this 6% cut as a distributor and the 43% cut as an exhibitor. Okay? So, point 4. The Swifts I guess I already covered this. So Swifts and Beyonce keeping 51%. That doesn't mean AMC gets 49% of everything, right? If it's shown at AMC, basically AMC is getting 49%. If it's shown at other competitors, then I'm saying AMC is getting 6% from them. And then the Swifts are getting the 51%. And that competitor is keeping the 43%. You will not find anywhere that says I'm right. So I'm just going to head that off right now. I am not telling you I know these numbers. I'm just telling you, when I get to sharing my numbers with you, you know how I got to them. And so you can kind of question them. All right, so 5th point, Of course, as people come to attend, then there's some amount of people who are buying food and beverage, and there's some amount of people buying merchandise. So that's another thing to consider. Uh, Sixth point, advanced ticket sales. So as we think about how big are these movies, it's helpful. I had done when the Taylor Swift announcement came out not long after that. We saw that Taylor, her pre-sales were all-time highs for any movie ever. Beating Avatar, beating Spider-Man No Way Home, beating Avengers Endgame. So that tells us a little something about how hot her tickets were and how fast they were selling. And then what's more, you've seen me in a couple other videos where I went out like all the way to November 4th, which is the fourth weekend for Taylor. And I looked at a bunch of cities. I think I looked at Detroit, Nashville, Tampa, St. Louis. I looked in my local area near Portland, Oregon. I looked at Kansas City. I know I looked at more. Minneapolis. And you could look all over the place and see sales for Taylor Swift all the way a whole month out from when it launches are very, very high compared to a normal movie. Her ticket sales are just through the roof, frankly. They're amazing. Um, so now we got to track Beyonce. This morning I was tracking and sharing with a couple of friends, and it kind of looked like maybe the ticket sales for Beyonce were not at the Taylor Swift level. Do not hear any negativity there. It's still amazing. You can still find a bunch of sold out theaters, some that are almost full. It's going awesome. So I mean, when you're comparing to someone who's broken the all time record, it's not negative to say, okay, we're not quite tracking at that level for Beyonce. Beyonce so far looks amazing. And then what's more, what are we, 12 hours in or something, at least in terms of today? So it's not like those tickets have even been out there very long. Let her fan base and casual fans start to find out about this more. Let's see how the ticket sales go. But that's going to be worth tracking, right? That's going to help tell us how big even is this. And we're going to talk about that some more in a minute. And then just a reminder, so it's weekend only showings. It's like Thursday through Sunday. So, even if you want to kind of make the case, and some have, and even some apes I've talked to have made the case, they don't think that's got much of a negative impact. My point is, you're not going to recover 100% of the people who might have otherwise attended on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. You shouldn't be losing much. I get that, and that's what a lot of apes would say. But it's not a zero impact to not have any weekday showings, really. So that's just something I consider in my forecast. You can disagree with me, but that's how I thought about it. And then the flip side, though, is I have a feeling there are some fans who would be repeat attenders. People who are just diehard fans. Sometimes you might go see a cool movie. That doesn't mean you're a diehard fan of the movie. Versus now you're a fan of an artist and you really want to see that artist and you feel a personal connection or you love their songs or whatever. There might be a little more repeat attendance than usual. And so that would be more of a plus side impact. And then finally, just what's the international percent versus domestic? So, like, is Taylor bigger in the US than overseas? And what I'm getting at here is all of these inputs are things we need to think about differently than a normal movie. If Avatar is coming out, it's fairly simple for me to forecast that and get to a reasonably accurate number. This is different. And so, in fact, I think, let me see if this is next. Yes, here we go. So, this is the top 10 all time concert movies. This you can see my source is thenumbers.com. This is also on Box Office Mojo. You can find all these. And I think there's some other, I know Billboard.com had released something like this. Everybody's kind of talking about it right now, so it's all over, right? So you can see none of these look anywhere remotely the size of what we've been talking about. Like, there's literally never been one, I think, as big as the Taylor Swift movie, and then let's see how Beyonce does too. But so far, for both of these, I'm believing they're bigger. So you basically now have two of the two all-time top concert movies, I believe. We're going to talk through that some more, but the reason I think this matters, I'm not just thinking about Taylor and Beyonce. As I look forward out to 2024, I'm starting to think, okay, I do not think this is a one and done. I think Adam has created a new business. I think more artists are coming. And so in the future, especially as I forecast out 2024, it's helpful for me to know. Now, you see some of these are pretty old, right? So Bieber was the top. You can see he was 100 million, although you see he was really heavy in the US. I guess domestic is US, Canada, Mexico, but not as so big internationally. And I don't know, was that because of distribution? Did maybe they didn't get it in certain countries? Either that or he's just bigger in the U.S. than overseas. Meanwhile, that's in 2011, right? So you can also factor in a lot of inflation here. Here that's 14 years ago. We all know ticket prices have gone way up on movies since then. Um, so factor in some inflation, factor in the fact that now these concert movies are evolving. Perhaps there's better, I don't know, just a better consumer connection on some of these movies now, or a fan connection, right? Second biggest ever was Miley Cyrus, but you can see that's like only the US, barely anything internationally. We know Beyonce and Taylor are going to have, huge attendance internationally. We saw when Taylor was announced, I think Odeon, like the app crashed and stuff. People were selling out over there. But I just want you to have an idea. So go check thenumbers.com or screenshot this page and you'll see the top 10. And actually, this list has the entire, it goes way down to, I don't know, the top 50 or something. Um, and it just does give you an idea. Like if the biggest ever was 100 million, and I've seen people talking about Taylor being like 2 billion. Okay, so then you just have to decide, do you agree that if someone's saying 2 billion, do you agree that Taylor's 20x the biggest concert movie of all time? Or do you disagree with that? And I guess I'm going to give you my number in a minute, so I'll hold that. But just helpful to know how have concert movies done in the past. But again, let me just repeat one last time. I don't know if it's the last time, but repeat once more that something feels different now about these movies and about the energy around them. And so I do think that they're going to be bigger than they've been in the past. So just some helpful information. All right, I mentioned we're going to have to track Beyonce. So here was a showing. I guess this is the AMC John R15. I can't remember what city I was in. I guess some of you guys will know it. I want to say this might have been Detroit. I can't recall. So you can see sold out. That looks awesome. I suppose except for these two assisted seats, but otherwise sold out. And there's some that are looking like almost full. That is the Thursday night. As I look at Friday and Saturday, like I said, it's something doesn't feel quite as big so far as Taylor Swift. But again, let's give it time. Let's give the Beehive time. I wouldn't even be surprised if since the time I took this screenshot like an hour and a half ago, more seats have been selling in other showings. So keep track of that. It's going to help you. Do yourself a favor, like go on the AMC website and play with some dates, play with some cities, look at both the Taylor Swift and the Beyonce movies, and you will see the difference I'm talking about. But let's also track and see over time, like, does Beyonce start catching up? Like Taylor's had, I don't remember guys anymore when that announcement was, but Taylor's had what, a month of ticket sales now or something, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't remember. So Beyonce's going to work on catching up, and the word's going to spread, and the energy's going to spread. So let's just be tracking that. But that's going to help you understand. Okay, is the Beyonce movie bigger than, smaller than, the same as the Taylor Swift? All right, finally numbers. Let's go through this. I'm going to give you my numbers. Some of you are going to say, you're crazy, that's way too small. Some of you are going to say, you're crazy, that's way too big. Some of you are going to say, I totally agree with you. I'm not going to get into arguing about numbers. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I got there. Let's start with Taylor, first of all. We know, again, that her pre-sales set all-time records. And so I went and looked at, okay, what was Spider-Man No Way Home's first weekend? Just the first weekend. What was Endgame? What was Avatar? So I looked at some really big movies and how did they perform in their opening weekend domestically. Then, one of the things that I do anytime I forecast some of these movies, especially the blockbusters, is I'll kind of factor in, all right, take the first weekend, or the first week even, and then each week there's some percentage the attendance goes down. And so that's called your hold or your legs. And so what's the percent the second week? How much did it go down from the first week? And then how much does the third week go down? How much does the fourth week? So I did that for both of these movies for myself, but a lot of it really depends on how big do you think that opening weekend is, and then how strong do you think the hold or those legs are. So that's kind of how I get to these numbers. I know I see apes out there who are going to call me crazy both ways. I acknowledge that. Like I said, there's a lot of humility in these numbers because frankly, before I share these one more time, I just got to say, I have no clue, guys. I'm giving you the best guess that I can make right now. And this, in fact, if I can kind of just toot my own horn, like in terms of the box office, I've been wildly accurate for a good, I don't know, 6 or 7 quarters where I've never been off by more than 4 or 5%, kind of about 96% accuracy or better pretty much every quarter. And I've been careful for you guys to be conservative so that I don't spread hopium. So in general, the box office has beat my forecasts. With these two in particular, I feel a very low level of confidence. So I'm also going to give you some views of without these, what's the box office, and with these. That'll come up in a minute. So, yeah, if you disagree, there's plenty of humility on my side that I could be wrong here. All right, so global box office for Taylor, I'm a little under 700 million. For Beyonce, I'm basically at 200 million. I feel a lot less confident on Beyonce because we don't have as many of those ticket sales to track so far. And we have obviously a shorter time frame. But again, I only used the December weekends in this forecast. I did go all the way through December, so there's an assumption that if you remember, the deal was for sure it's going to show for 4 weekends. But much like Taylor, I will not be surprised if they add dates after that. So I've actually gone ahead and forecast through the entire month of December for Beyonce. And then same for Taylor. This forecast is all the way through the end of the quarter, not just those 4 weeks. Yeah, so I've seen some of you on Twitter in particular saying much bigger numbers than this for Taylor, and I've seen some saying smaller numbers. But so that you know, and anything else I share, because I'm even going to give you a Q4 earnings forecast already now, um, you can just in your mind flex up or down from this number I'm giving you. And don't call me a shill if this number's smaller than yours. I'm openly saying I have no idea. All I know is she is just man, the Taylor Swift impact is huge. Like you guys have followed the whole thing in the NFL, how like the viewership of the last game was just off the charts. It was Super Bowl level views. How Travis Kelsey, like his Instagram and jersey was blowing up just because of the Taylor Swift effect. So at this point, I do not put it past her to just make me look stupid and that her numbers are going to be way above this. I totally can see it. But I got as aggressive as I felt I could. The industry forecast, by the way, for the opening weekend is like 125 at the very top. I think the range I've seen is like 70 to 125. That's a big range. Domestic opening. I think I had like 138. So I even went above the industry here and just pushed it to where I felt I could push it. But boy, yeah, let's see her beat the number. Like if she does, we're all going to celebrate, right? Okay, so then I told you I'm using a 6% number for distribution. So now this adds to AMC. Now I'm going to tell you kind of bits and pieces of AMC's revenue. So for distribution then in the quarter, here's the impact in Q4 for both Taylor and Beyonce. So basically a little more than 50 million between them. So that right there, just the fact that Adam created worldwide distribution for AMC, at these numbers I'm giving you, that's a $50 million add to AMC that, in one quarter that never existed before. That's a big deal. All right, and then AMC's admissions, because these movies, I told you we lost a bunch of movies out of the quarter, but now add these back in, so you get, about $180 million of admissions at AMC. On admissions, I'm using kind of historical market share and kind of those sort of things, but we shall see. Then AMC's other revenue. So you get merch. There's a whole bucket of other revenue that AMC has. That tracks at a certain percent over time. So I just use a pretty standard rate there. And so then you get another basically 34 million bucks. And then finally, food and beverage. You can see that's $134 million of food and beverage sales. So you can just see all of this adds up to a whole lot of money that Adam and Taylor and Beyonce have now created that did not exist before. So it's phenomenal. And, again, whether you agree with me at these numbers, whether you think they should be a lot bigger, or either you think they should be smaller, the point is these did not exist. And Adam basically created this from nowhere, in particular the distribution line. So I applaud him. That's awesome. That's great business leadership. Okay, so a few notes about the quarter, and this will even give you the bottom line, and then I'm going to give you a little more detail. The domestic box office, without them, had us lower than $2 billion. Now again, remember all those movies that moved out, like Dune and Ghostbusters and Craven. Once upon a time, Blade, Marvel's doing a Blade reboot. That was in the quarter, and that had moved out. That didn't move out because of the strike. That moved out before the strike. But there were a bunch of movies that were supposed to be in Q4 that had moved out. So we were going to be below $2 billion for the domestic box office. With Tay-Bay, I'm saying we're at 2.3. Now remember, the last two quarters both, we've been a little above 2.6, basically 2.7 and then 2.6 these last two quarters. So that's still lower than these last two quarters. But remember, we're going to talk about that distribution line that's been added in. So it's not all things equal. Popcorn's been growing, that distribution line gets added in. We're making more money on other lines that didn't used to exist. So hold that thought. So you can see just by themselves, I've added basically $440 million domestically back in to offset a lot of what we lost from those other movies moving out. So in effect, they fixed the strike issue. Adam and team, you know, responded to the strike and fixed it, and now basically made things even better going forward. So it's amazing. There's this saying, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. And boy, I'm glad at what they've invented here. All right, so AMC's revenue and earnings without Tebe, earnings was a minus 212. I told you I was not looking forward to sharing that number. We were going to have a real rough quarter. By the way, I've got an assumption in the fourth quarter about goodwill impairment. I've got a whole video on goodwill impairment. I've told you about that before. Both of the last 2 years in the fourth quarter, there's been an impairment charge. That is also almost impossible to forecast. I have no idea. I believe it should be smaller this time around, but I don't know. It could be anywhere from 0 to, I could be wrong, and it could be bigger. So I do have an impairment charge in my forecast. So not all this minus 212 is cash impacts. That's a non-cash impact. There's something called depreciation and amortization. That's a non-cash impact. So just know I'm not saying that we're going to burn all that cash, but I am saying it was going to be a rough quarter. But with these now added in, they've swung us completely the other way. So you can see it's a $233 million contribution to earnings just from these two. It's phenomenal. And again, let's go back. You've got to decide, especially at that top level. If I'm saying I think Taylor's about 700 million globally and Beyonce's about 200 million globally in Q4 only, then you just decide if you want to go up or below what I've said, and you can just kind of sort of eyeball that, or just in your own mind do some mental math. So I'm saying Q4 is now positive earnings, and in fact quite a bit bigger than our last two. So we just basically Q2 was 8.6. If you saw my forecast for Q3, I've said actually we're flat. We're going to have 8.6 again, and I think I've shared with you many times, like forecasting the box office, I can be really, really accurate. Forecasting earnings is actually quite a bit harder. So you're just going to have to not hold me to those numbers. I'm just doing the best I can for you and admitting that I'm going to be wrong about some of that. But I had forecast 8.6 for Q3, and then now I'm saying a positive 21 million for Q4. Big, big deal. So that's because of the added admissions, concessions, merch, distribution, times both. And then just note, so if you see like all of these added up is a lot more than 233, but the way that I forecast takes into account expenses. You've got operating expenses I've told you about. There's a few other expenses that get lumped in there. So you can't just take all this revenue and say that's all earnings. You have expenses to do all of this. And so that's why then the earnings impact is the 233. So just awesome. Whether I'm way over or way under or right on, the point is it's a really, really, really big deal. Adam has added I'm going to just use the term buttload to earnings this quarter, thanks to Taylor and Beyonce. All right, so for the full year, here's where that brings us. So just a reminder of where we were. You can see actually we've been real consistent lately on revenue, the top line, but that's at half of the movies. And I've done some videos for you before, especially when I was real annoyed with all the stock manipulation that we've seen, where I showed you we've basically gotten to pre-2020, so kind of pre-COVID revenue numbers on half of the movies. So that's file that away. Don't forget that one anytime Shorty tries to distort on you that what happens when we get more movies. If we're hitting, pre-2020 revenue numbers on half the movies, and that's without distribution so far. And so you can see, remember I said Q4 is a pretty tough quarter because of the strike impact, and yet here we are, I'm saying we're going to hit the same revenue basically on even less movies. So again, what happens when more movies come in, popcorn ramps up? What if we get more concerts and more distribution? I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute too. All right, so then expenses you can see has also been pretty even the last few quarters. Granted, Q3 and Q4, those are forecasts from me, guys. So that's not a for sure number. I'm just giving you my forecast. But you can see no matter what, like we're way above Q1. That was a smaller quarter, and I had told you long before, like that was our last, not as fun quarter, and you can just see it in the results from Q1 to Q2. Look at that, like $244 million swing. That's a big deal in the earnings swing there. But so if someone had asked me on Twitter, hey, does this mean for the full year could we get to positive earnings? No, because we got to go back to that first quarter. There was a big one-time charge as well. Actually, the lawsuit expense was in that quarter. That was a big hit. So not all of this is AMC's loss. Really, Shorty would never bother to remind you of that, so I'm reminding you. There was a one-time expense from the lawsuit and the settlement that got put into Q1. It's still carried on the balance sheet in Q2, so I'm hoping when we get to the Q3 earnings, you're going to see an improvement on the balance sheet, moving that liability off. But because of the lawsuit impact, and it was basically half of our loss in Q1, so we're at a minus, not quite 200. Without the lawsuit, we'd kind of be at a minus 100 for the year, I'm saying. So still negative on the year, but we're kind of to the point I'm not concerned about that. First of all, everything with AMC is a forward view at this point, and the whole point is Shorty's trying to convince everybody that AMC could have cash flow problems. No way in heck. We were cash flow positive last quarter. I believe we're going to be right there, close this quarter, and then next quarter you can see for sure if I'm right about Taylor and Beyonce, then we'll be cash flow positive. So going forward, we're only getting stronger from where we are. But there's your full year view. Screenshot that if you want. Keep in mind the last 2 quarters are my forecasts. But some things you need to know. So versus 2022, that's an improvement of $750 million at the bottom line. That's the direction your leadership team has taken this company. From 2022 till now, they improved the bottom line $750 million if my forecast is anywhere close, right? That's a big if. I'm forecasting half the year. Although Q3, remember, the box office is locked, so this should be a reasonably accurate forecast. So huge improvement year over year. And then versus 2019, look at this. We're only 47 million short. Again, on my forecast, only 47 million short with half the movies. So we're about to, in my opinion, start blowing history out of the water. AMC is going to be a very different business than it's been. That was really the genesis of this YouTube channel, guys, because I was doing a lot of analysis, sharing some things on Twitter. I started basically like August-ish of 2022 on this channel, but my Twitter goes all the way back to the beginning of the whole thing. So go back to early 2021. And I started sharing on YouTube, and one of the first things I did was to make a video to show you guys that AMC's fundamentals are actually better now than pre-COVID. If you look at debt, if you look at rent, if you look at film costs as a percent of revenue, if you look at operating costs as a percent of revenue, if you look at ticket prices, food and beverage per person, every single item for AMC's fundamentals is actually better now than pre-COVID. And so I've just kind of beat on that drum for more than a year on this channel and more than 3 years on Twitter, or not more than 3, but about 3 years on Twitter. So here's the point. I mean, you can see it. We had half the movies, and we're only $47 million short on earnings compared to 2019. So get ready. What do you think's coming, right? So speaking of which, 2024, here's some things to think about. I'm not going to give you the 2024 forecast today, but I'm going to give you some things to be thinking about. Sorry about this cold, guys. Consider the global cut of the box office. So that distribution percent, that 6%, let's say we find out it's really 8%. That's actually going to be a huge swing, to the numbers. So we got to kind of figure out at some point, AMC is not going to share it. I emailed investor relations and they wouldn't give it to me. And I respect that. They're, not sharing some competitive information. But any possible market share gains because AMC is doing these concerts, any kind of tweak in that distribution percent, and any increase in merchandising. What happens if they have, I don't know, Taylor Swift t-shirts or Beyonce, socks or something. That was a dumb example, sorry, but you get the point. What if there's ever any apparel or any other merch? Or I know we're doing the friendship bracelets. I don't think those are for sale, but say there ever was something like that for sale. So there's a lot that could start to happen here in this business line. So that you're aware, based on the way that I had calculated all of this, for kind of every $10 million in domestic box office from these concerts, once you get into the whole global number, AMC is going to make basically $5 million on an increase to their revenue. So just kind of say about half of the domestic box office, once you add the global, AMC's distribution cut, merchandising, food and beverage, AMC is going to have like an equivalent of half of the domestic box office added to their revenues every time there's one of these concerts. Real rough math for you, but just to think about. And the reason I bring that up is here's some questions to ask for 2024. So, how many concerts do we think they're going to have in 2024? I've got a number I've used. I put some placeholders in my forecast because I do believe there will be more. And I'll talk about that whenever I get around to the 2024 video. But so ask yourself, how many concerts do you think we might add in 2024? What are the tiers of artists, right? Every artist is not going to be the same in terms of their impact at the box office. There'll be some egos probably involved in that, but it's just, let's be honest, you're not going to have Taylor Swift level for every single movie. You just aren't. So, all right, are some of these blockbuster level like a movie? Think about it like movies. There's blockbuster level, there's kind of a second tier, there's a third tier, there's indie level. So as you think about what you think might happen in 2024, that's something else I'm thinking about. And then I already talked about how much does AMC make in the distribution, cut. And then to what extent, let's be honest, competitors see this and I'm sure are already working plans, working phones, trying to land their own artist. So what happens if Cineworld, Cinemark, anybody else lands an artist before AMC does? And now AMC is the one paying distribution and not getting paid. So we can't just assume that every single artist from here through eternity is only going to work with AMC. Now, AMC is the biggest, so it's pretty clear. Artists, there's something going on where artists are happy to partner with Adam and AMC. I'm sure that he's making it worth their while. So that's great, and we're going to have more, I believe that. But, just worth considering that we're not going to have 100% of the market. All right, coming soon. I mentioned I'll do the 2024, the full year. I'll do a video on the proxy vote. That's starting to feel less and less important to me because I think, I don't know, we're just all pretty focused on the fact that the business is starting to really turn, and I'm a lot more excited about that. But these are videos I'll do very soon, maybe within the week. We'll see. So some final thoughts. First, the true impact of these concerts so far, it's unknown. Like I told you earlier, if anybody's telling you they really know what's happening with the merch, what's happening with the total box office, what AMC's cut is, we don't know that stuff. So I've given you one guy's point of view on a forecast, but that's all it is. It's a point of view, and I've even told you that I feel, of all the forecasts I've shared with you, this is the least confident I've felt. Usually I don't even like to share a number unless I'm confident, but this is just such a hot topic that I felt like I want to share a point of view. And there's going to be a wide range on forecasts, right? Even my own forecast, I'm looking at, like, take that Taylor Swift. So if I'm saying 681 globally for the admissions, for the box office, in my mind, that means we could be anywhere from a couple 100 million below that to double it on the upside. So people are going to have wide-ranging forecasts until we really can understand this and have some history to really judge this. I'll call it almost like a sub-industry that we're going to have to be looking at. No matter what, third bullet here, it's amazing, regardless. It doesn't matter if my numbers are right. It doesn't matter if your numbers are right. The point is, this is a fantastic development and makes AMC far stronger than just a few weeks ago before all these announcements came out, right? Now we are not only a movie exhibitor and a concert exhibitor, but a concert movie distributor. It's a big deal. And then just like I've shown you, my current forecast for Q4 would actually make it the third positive quarter in a row. So that's really awesome if that becomes true. But we got to see, first of all, does Q3 actually land where I said it would land? And then, does Q4 pan out like I said it would? So regardless, just frankly, I'm thrilled with the fact that we have these. I think we ought to all support it, go see them. Don't forget the fact that there's some movies this has kind of moved around, and we can show some love to those movies too. And as always, I believe we're going to win. Let's go.